Hey, everybody, this is Kris McPeak from the Elevate Your Eight podcast. And on today's episode of the Note Closer Show, Scott and I dig into all the things you need to know to be a 9-to-5 side hustler with your small business. And we come to the conclusion on what is actually the very best Christian Bale movie ever.
This is the Note Closer Show, where you get the latest developments in distressed note investing and learn the secrets of how you can control millions of dollars worth of property for pennies on the dollar. Get educated and entertained by someone who has closed thousands of deals and lives to support you in achieving the same. Now, here's your host, CEO of We Close Notes, Scott Carson.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with you today. And I'm even more jacked up because I've got a new friend join us here, and her energy just pours out of the screen or the earbuds or the microphone. She's a bundle of fun. I was honored to be a guest on her show. And that's the beautiful thing that I love about podcasting is we meet so many great individuals and so many great people. We've got some mutual friends. And this lady, doing some research, I was like, oh, she's perfect guest for you guys out there and you gals out there that are juggling note investing and real estate investing as a side hustle. I mean, she's been known as the Mary Poppins of a higher education. So we're honored to have this supercalifragilisticexpialidocious person on here today on the Note Closure Show. So good morning, Kris McPeak. Honored to have you here today.
Good morning, Scott. Thank you for having me. But here's the question. Can you say it backwards?
Yeah, hell no. Hell no. Can you?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Wow. Let's get that transcribed.
That's what you get when you watch Mary Poppins so many times as a child. You can turn the volume down and do all the lyrics and all the lines. No, the Mary Poppins of higher education thing came out of the fact that I moved jobs so frequently. And I would be like, okay, I will stay at this institution until the wind changes, like she says. Although I'm like not a nanny, not even close to being a nanny, but I was still, that was my jam. And I still am in higher education, but I spent about 20 years, the first 20 years of my professional career in college housing and residence life. So if that means nothing to your listeners, then I'm just going to say the word dorm, and that should explain it all. So I ran those buildings, communities, the whole thing, and I lived in for probably 10 or 11 of those 20 years. And the reason I do a podcast now has to do with the part of that part of my life and working in an incredibly high touch business, that there was a definite blur between work and life, right. Especially when you lived in, because you never could say like, okay, I'm definitely not at work when you live where you work. So anyway, the show I host is called Elevate Your Eight. It is all time management and productivity. And that came from a place of trying to find that dividing line and what made me leave college housing in the first place. I did not want to work someplace that was sucking the life out of me. I no longer wanted to work at a place where going home at 4:30 or going home at 5 o'clock was a non, you're not leaving till the work is done. And I didn't want to work at a place anymore where the expectation to go in on the weekends and be connected to my email all the time sort of was an expectation. So I got out of that mess. And in the process of finding myself in the new place, I thought about this concept of Elevate Your Eight. And it's all about honoring your work-life alignment, your wellness, and then figuring out how to prioritize the rest of the stuff that you do. So if you're honoring your work-life alignment and you're working only 8 hours a day, and you're honoring your wellness and you're sleeping 8 hours every night, then the only other thing you really have to pay attention to are those other 8 hours. Those are the 8 we wish to elevate.
I love it.
Elevate Your Eight.
I love it a lot. Now, let me ask you a question. Does the smell of Top Ramen and Tony's Dollar Pizzas kind of drive you crazy? Because that's like dorm food. You walk to every dorm and that's what they're cooking.
Yeah, macaroni and cheese. All of the the delivery places all knew. The dorm lobby. Like, okay, who's ordering from King Pizza tonight? If you buy one, you get 2 free. And yeah, I mean, that's a whole other show in itself
It is, yeah.
because I was a very unscrupulous resident advisor and hall director in the early parts of my career back in the 90s, where some of the things that are super important now I didn't really pay attention to. But again, that's another show. That's a show where cocktails should be part of the mix.
Exactly, exactly. So let's talk about that elevating your aim. I love that because so many of our listeners out there are working full time in their careers. They're doing something else. They want to be a real estate investor. And most real estate investors, that's what they do. It's their side hustle.
Yeah.
As Gary Vee, you've got from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. a lot of times to do your side hustle. But let's talk about that transition aspect. You talked about finding yourself and some of the things. What are the biggest keys for somebody who's looking to start something new on the side to help them elevate their extra time or what time they have left at the end of the day?
Sure. Yeah. What I say, it's safest for people to start in a place where, do you really know how long it takes for you to do your basic, average, everyday things? So, like, ask me honestly how long it takes me to take a shower and get dressed. And I know that because I've paid specific attention to that. And that's sort of how I build out that morning routine. I know exactly how much time my commute is going to take. And pre or post COVID and pre COVID, all of that is different. But you have to learn to be flexible and work within the environment that you're living in. Do you eat your breakfast while you're sitting in front of the news and most of your meal time is spent engaged in that show, but it really only takes you 7 minutes to eat your Pop Tart or whatever you're having? So I think being really honest with yourself and very clear on how long it takes you to do those types of things. And then, of course, there's always this gadget that I'm holding in my hand. Um, you know, we have a love-hate relationship with technology, and it does a lot of amazing things to help us be more productive. And then it also contributes to a lot of the black holes of productivity. And that's where we're going to go into that thing to look at something, to check our bank balance, to get directions for, where you're meeting your friend at lunch. And the next thing your face is up in it and you've just spent 45 minutes doing the Instagram scroll thing that you hadn't planned to do. And so I think, again, being very aware of doing those things and having that be a part of your everyday behavior. So I love embracing the concept of some kind of routine within your day, whether that's a morning routine, a lunchtime routine, and an evening routine. I embrace all of them in various stages depending on what I've got going on. I do work a full-time job that I absolutely positively love. I have no desire to leave this and go work my side hustle full time like a lot of people out there in the world do. So what it came down to for me is, when are the best times during the day to work on my business, and then how do I schedule those things out? So I swim, and my husband and I run a swim team. So I technically have two side hustles. I'm not bragging, but it just is what it is. We run the swim team, and most days, I'm getting up, I'm doing my meditation, my journaling, making coffee for him, coffee for me, making breakfast, pack the swim bag, and get in the car and go. So mornings are really more focused on my wellness, my mindset, those types of things. And then the evenings are where I will schedule my social media posts or work on finances for the swim team. Or when I was writing the book, I'll talk about the book in a second, I would write at night. And then I would leverage my vacation days to do things like this, like podcast recording and editing and stuff like that. Charles and I travel when we're swimming, when we're competing, and then we'll take a vacation like once a year. But so for the most part, I have a lot of vacation time that goes unused, and I have learned to use it to work my side hustle. And that works really fine for me right now because we're not in a position where I can go get on a cruise boat or anything like that. Maybe, in a couple of months. So then lunchtime is sometimes doing a balance of both things. Charles and I like very different television shows. So lunchtime is when I can usually dig into something that I want to watch on Netflix or Hulu. And I love to knit. So I fit, some of my hobbies into that mix. So the morning, lunchtime, and evening routine, I embrace all of them. But, you may not feel like a morning routine is your jam, and that's okay. Just figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish within the framework of the day, and then specifically schedule the time for that and determine, like, okay, I'm going to work for 1 hour in my business at this time during the day. And then you do that. And if the phone is, high risk for you, then you move the phone out of the way and you put it in a drawer, and you don't make it, present while you're trying to balance your books or write your show notes or edit or something like that. That's really where the whole elevate your eight concept works itself through, is understanding how long it takes you to do things, prioritizing, and scheduling, and sticking to that, and telling yourself, these are the two most important things I want to get done today, and so I'm gonna bust through and do them.
I love it. Now, that's a great counsel that they're for, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, figuring out, like you said, being honest with what your schedule is. I can think back, one of my first most effective jobs I was good at was that we actually had to keep track of every 15 minutes of what we were doing.
Yeah.
As a great kind of journaling aspect. I'm going to turn that in every day. What did you do every 15 minutes, whether it was doing this or that? That's a great way to kind of help you out track. Okay, where are there holes in my schedule that I can plug with doing something productive versus, Facebook stalking or social sleuthing, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that concept of doing a time on task, because even like in our day-to-day work, like, we can open our email box and get stuck in there for hours because we're not in control of our box. And I am a little bit guilty of that, but what I try to do is open my email twice a day, once in the morning and once after lunch. And I work the whole Pomodoro thing with that. I'm going to set a timer, and I'm going to read and respond to as much email as I can in 30 minutes. And then I'm going to close it. If somebody really needs to get a hold of me, they're going to call me. They're going to say, I absolutely need an answer from you right now. My staff and I use WhatsApp while we're doing the remote work thing to connect, and that's they know they can find me there if an email I'm not in the process of checking email. So the things that really need to be dealt with in the framework of the day, I'll respond to those before I close the inbox. But I do really try to utilize the concept of to-do lists and what absolutely has to get finished today. So deadlines are important to me because a lot of times I will wind up not working on a project in 2 or 3 days before it's due. And a lot of that is just because I have such revolving responsibilities in the day job. And I used to be really good at projecting those things and getting things done early. But as I continue to build up on tasks and being very, very set on, I'm going home at 4:30 regardless, then I have to fill the time with the amount of time that it takes to finish the project, if that makes sense. And I think there's a law, that's Parkinson's law or something like that. There's some academic person that wrote about a law that equals that. So, and that's okay. I'm fine with that because I've realized that I'm going to be able to finish the project in the amount of time that I have. And that takes the stress off me. Normally I would, be pulling my hair out. And I know a lot of other people that would be in that same boat, but I know I'm going to get it done when I tell myself this is the day it has to get done.
Now, do you think, I love the idea of to-do lists, but I've also been known that a lot of people use to-do lists to generate a lot of things and make themselves feel good because they check off a lot of small things. At the end of the day, the biggest things they didn't get done or accomplished, but they got, oh, look at all this stuff I got done, right?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
That's a really good point, a really good question. And I think it really just depends on where your focus is on what's important, because for some people, those little things are the important things. Because if they don't write it down, remind themselves to do it, it probably doesn't get done. And that could be something like, we're out of creamer, or go pick up the dry cleaning, or you need to buy, coolant for your car. I need to do that for myself, and I need to write that down, because if I don't buy it, then I get the overheating thing, and it's move over.
I'll text you later. I'll text you later on that. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so, yeah, in some cases, people need those little reminders to do the small things because otherwise they would forget. But I think maybe if you're a person that's like that and you're looking at the big things, and you tell yourself like, okay, today of this huge ass list that I have, these two things are the most important small things, and then this big thing is the most important big thing. And if you just put your focus on those three things, one's going to be a big thing, one's going to be those two small things, and then move forward with the next thing. Of all the tasks on those small, of all the small tasks on the one side, which, if they don't get done today, are going to set you back or disappoint someone or mean that you can't finish five other things, and just do those things first. Feel the intensity behind the urgency of those things and focus on those things first, and then get them out of the way so that you don't have to stress about them the next day.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about a little about this book you're talking about, because I think it's a big phenomenal thing that a lot of people need to tap into. Let's talk about that. What made you decide to write a book, and let's talk about the basis for it.
I'm super proud of that book. I've written two other books. One is called Making Work Work for You, and that's sort of a primer on the whole like work-life alignment thing. And then I wrote the book Elevate Your 8, which started out the idea for the podcast. And I'm in a mastermind group that Allison Melody from Food Heals has been running, and everything just kind of got tipped over on its head with this COVID pandemic, and a lot of things that a lot of folks had planned to do, live events, speaking engagements, stuff like that, that all went away. So Allison Melody and Laura Peterson hosted this, book publishing group. It was a course and an accountability group, and we were all going to, move towards writing our first bestseller in 14 weeks. And I wasn't, I wasn't planning to write a book this year. I don't have the energy to do it. And two of my Rise and Bloom buddies were like, "Oh no, you should do it. This will be a great opportunity." And I'm like, "What the hell am I going to write about?" And I had put in a speaking request for She Podcasts to talk very specifically about how do you balance your show with a full-time job.
Right.
And quite honestly, because I got tagged at the day job a couple years ago for bringing the side hustle into the workspace here. That's a big no-no at a lot of places. Like, we're not, no cross-pollination.
Yep.
You do your day job here, and then you do that other stuff at home. And I do happen to be at my day job today, but I'm in the break room, so I'm removed. And there's a whole chapter about that in the book. But anyway, so I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to write about that. And this whole concept of side hustle popped into my head when I actually had taken one of Ramit Sethi's online quizzes. He's the I Will Teach You to Be Rich guy. And I think it was like, what kind of side business or what kind of small business will you have? And the answer to that question for me was the hustler. And I first like, I don't like that term. That's
a
like,
magazine.
Yeah, a magazine or a Paul Newman.
There you go. Yep, exactly.
And so I'm not either of those things. But the more I read about the description of this person, like, this is the person that needs to have more balance. This is the person that constantly is opening 10 tabs on their computer, and sometimes lacks focus. But at the end, this description of the hustler was a really, like, I'm like, that totally is me. Like, I can absolutely. It's kind of like when I discovered that I was accepting the fact that I'm a Gen X person. When they first started writing about Gen X, I'm like, that is not me. That's my baby sister who wears flannel and listens to Pearl Jam, but that is not me. And the more I read about Gen X, I'm like, that's totally me. So it takes a little while for me to dig in and accept some of these areas where I fall into. But anyway, so I embraced the hustler, and then I thought, okay, 9-to-5 side hustler. This totally makes sense. So the name of the book is The 9-to-5 Side Hustler: A Guide to Balancing Your Day Job with Your Small Business. So I dug into that. There is a lot of sharing of just that whole experience of getting in trouble at the day job, and what I learned from that. The whole experience of what it's like to run a second business with your spouse. That is very tricky sometimes. And then just figuring out, like, what am I doing in my day job to keep that solid so that I can leave at 4:30 and go home. So it's even a combo. Some of the philosophies from my first two books work themselves into that. But it's really, if somebody is struggling with a day job and a side hustle, knowing good and well that they need their day job or they're committed to their day job, but they want to do this other thing, whether it's a podcast, whether it's real estate, whether it's coaching, or running a nonprofit, any of those things. I feel strongly that this book is a good way to recognize the humanity in what you're doing, because there's lots of people that want that. And it's the difference between this whole concept of passion projects, I think is misunderstood. I think that we choose our vocation according to our strengths and where we contribute the best. And then I think the passion projects are where we direct like our hobbies and the side hustles and things like that. So if your passion projects winds up aligning more with your strengths and your talents, that's where people wind up saying like, oh, I'm totally going to leave my day job
Yeah.
and I'm going to go do this. But I know that I am in a day job that completely reflects my strengths and my talents, and I identify as an educator. I need to be in education, but I also really like this area of talking about productivity, work-life alignment, making sure that you're finding the job that you're supposed to be in. And it's great that they all are beginning to interconnect. Yeah, so that's really what the book is all about. It's helping people feel a little more comfortable in their skin if they are the 9 to 5 side hustler.
Right. We get a lot of people that are, tune into our podcast or tune into webinars, and they're always worried about sharing what they're doing. Like, oh, I have a LinkedIn profile. I'm afraid my boss is going to see that I put on that I now have an LLC.
Yeah.
Or that I'm doing something else. Can you talk a little about that and how to kind of deal with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think for me, I was always really, I'm very blessed. I have an amazing supervisor. We have an incredibly dynamic relationship. And when I started the podcast, I was very upfront about that, very transparent about that. When it moved into, I'm going to do some coaching, I'm going to do Facebook Live, I'm going to be on Instagram, I'm going to, do this other stuff. It came down to my colleagues being frustrated that I was using my daytime job as a place to do my other things. And I just was like so sucked into it that I wasn't being productive here at the place that was, really paying me money. So that, my boss and I had that big conversation about that. And ever since then, I've had a lot more clarity on the concept of the separation. So on the one hand, I'm very blessed. I have a supervisor who completely understands, supports me, and has given me amazing feedback on what that means. For somebody that might not have a supervisor who's totally supportive, that's a really tough place to split off. So I think it's very specifically identifying when are you at work and when are you not at work. But I do think that there should be some level of sharing, at least like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, and not like I'm asking permission for this, but
Right.
more like I'm telling this to you because I'm really excited about it and I want to share it with you because you're my supervisor and you're responsible for my professional development, et cetera. I mean, I think any kind of difficult supervisory relationship can be managed a little bit if there's open communication between the two and there's honesty. And then even if the person that you work for is the Antichrist, there should still be an opportunity for you to go into that person's office and to be able to share with them very specifically, this is how you feel about something. This is, when you said this, I felt this, and couching that very specifically. And then if it doesn't look like that relationship is going to turn, that really is a space where you might need to rethink, is this the place that you belong? And I've had to make that decision for myself before. And it was even the impetus for me in deciding to get out of housing, because I was working for a gentleman who worked 60 hours a week, was very, very proud of that, and was very adamant that his managers do the same. And I cracked at work one day, like, well, I'm going to be the first associate director in this field that goes home at 5 o'clock. And then I got called in the office, like, if that's really the way that you feel, this probably isn't the best fit for you, because I think you're approaching this in a very unrealistic way. Well, man, did that hit me on the head like a big ass hammer. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just, he's right. Maybe this is not where I belong. So I think, yeah, for folks that are trying to figure out how to put their side hustle out on their professional profile, I think it is worth having a conversation with your supervisor and just being honest about what you're doing. But I think too, you list that very separately on your profile. And maybe it's even that your day job is still the thing that's most present, because you can say like, you know, working at California State University, whatever, 2009 present, and then that side hustle is listed underneath as a secondary thing, which is still giving you visibility on that space. That's what LinkedIn is for. So that's helpful. And then I also think it's good to understand your employer's philosophy, the workplace culture on things like social media and side hustles, conflict of interest. Get very familiar with those policies. And if it seems like, you know that you work at an institution or a corporation where the culture is that they're all in your business on social media, then maybe you rethink where you're sharing your stuff, and you have to be a little bit more strategic on where you're sharing your info. But I found here that once I got over that hump of clearing that air with my supervisor and having a really nice boundary, there are even people on the campus that I know that aren't in my department that will ask me about my job. And, I listened to your podcast this week and it was really fun and I enjoyed it. And so that kind of stuff I think is really cool. It's a blending of the two that is a lot more comfortable because there's not a conflict of interest.
Right.
I didn't, they just happened to find my thing and like, that's Kris McPeak. I know her and I'm going to listen to that show. And I do get some listeners that way that find me because they're interested in the topic that I'm talking about. And they happen to, is that really the same person? And yes, it's me. Like we work together sometimes. And I find that, that kind of discovery, I think, is really fun. It's organic and there's no pressure. I haven't reached out to that person and said, hey, will you listen to my podcast? Right. Does that make sense? I mean, I kind of went like all over the place on that area.
Oh, it totally makes sense. You got to have the conversation. And it comes down to, like you said beforehand, if your job is in alignment with your passions and your strengths, great. And if they're providing for your future, your retirement or 401k,
Absolutely.
Stuff like that,
yeah,
kudos. And then you usually just have to fill out, especially in the finance field where I come from, we had to fill out an OBA, an outside business agreement. And it was nothing big like, hey, I'm in the rental business or I'm in the fix and flip. This is what I do for my hobby. It's not going to affect with their business. It's two separate. But if you see something, knowing that I'm not putting any work resources or stuff into it to take away from my full-time job, and you still got to show up 100% at the work. I mean, obviously, if you're slacking and as we get a lot of people that try to take phone calls from bankers during their work days, like that doesn't work very well. If you keep running to a conference room every 15 minutes to answer the phone, somebody's going to call you out on it pretty fast, right?
And I was absolutely doing that. I was closing my office door and saying, I'm doing Facebook Live right now. Well, WTF, McPeak, like, what are you thinking? This is so stupid. And it just was like, it just went completely over my head that was inappropriate. So It was a hard lesson. It was a very obvious lesson once I had the conversation. And I think I'm so much closer to my supervisor now because I was able to hear her feedback, take it very seriously, and completely, beyond pivot, do a complete 180 and okay, I've got to package this in a way that I'm giving 100% to both places when I'm in those places, and the lines aren't blurred and everything, it's very comfortable, and that feels great.
I love it. Now on your website too, with everything being crazy this year, it's so chaotic. You're at the office, but a lot of Americans are still trying to juggle working from home and trying to figure things out. I mean, I've been to my office 3 times or 4 times in the last like 9 months. And it's just down the road, less than a mile from my house. Right?
Yeah.
And you have to figure that balance of stuff. What are some counsel that you would give those listening that are dealing or struggling with that? Because they're like, oh, it just seems that the day every day is a Groundhog Day. I feel so ineffective because I don't have my schedule and it's been thrown in an upheaval. What would you say to people?
Yeah, no, that is such a great question. And I think it is still, what's percolating through our lives right now. So the one thing I think that's super important is if you are working from home and you are working from home the majority of the time, then you should carve out a space wherever that is in your house that is your office, and you don't do anything else in that space. Because the second that you start checking your work email and working on projects when you're propped up in bed or you're on the living room couch, it's so easy to like, I'm going to put Hulu on right now. And then you get lost in that. So I think that's really important to set that space. And when we were first absolutely closing campus and everybody was working from home, I took a monitor home. I took home some of my, because I have so much stuff in my office. I'm like Maureen O'Hara and the Quiet Man. Like I must have all my things about me. So I have all these things, and I just took a handful of those tchotchkes home. I took some books, and we have a desk in the living room, and my husband was fantastic. Like he turned it towards the window, and so I had like sunlight. I could look like I'm looking at my office window, and I had a desk lamp, and I had my monitor and everything, and that was definitely my office. That was my space. And so if I was seated in that chair, Charles, I'm in the chair, so I'm at work, and don't bug me because I'm at work. And then, I would take my lunch break and I would go someplace else in the house, or I would go outside. So I think that's the very first thing, is to identify that workspace. Now you're not commuting anymore because you're working from home. So what's something that can either simulate the commute or whatever it is that you do at your commute? My commute is when I listen to podcasts or audiobooks and I get in my own personal development. And I can't go to the pool right now because the pools are closed. So my morning commute consisted of putting on my walking shoes, taking Duke for a nice long walk, and listening to whatever I would normally listen to in the car. So now I've identified another space to, fill that void. And we also, the swim team would do some dry land stuff through Zoom, which was kind of nice. So I think you still have to do something in the morning that will simulate what you would be doing if you were commuting to the office. And then you decide that for yourself, whatever that is. I needed the movement, and I needed to have something so I could listen to the Newsworthy and Podcasting Business School and those types of things. So taking Duke for a walk was a great way to do that, since I wasn't going to the pool. And then I think, like, when you're going to leave the office for the day, you do shut everything down. So the computer goes off, you close the laptop, turn the mouse off if you have a wireless mouse, and then you just move away from that spot. So it doesn't mean like the office space is here in the day, but then I'm going to clear all this stuff off at night so we can play Scrabble or whatever. Just keep that space sacred, but then go away from it, and go outside or go to the kitchen and switch your table around so that you can watch TV in your living room if they're in the same place. We have TVs in the bedroom, so we don't watch TV in the living room anymore, but that made it a very obvious, easy space for me. So yeah, I think just for listeners to define very specifically where their workspace is going to be. And then it does require some discipline, because it can be really, really easy to just get sucked into, oh, I'm at home, I can work whenever I want. And that may be true. You may be, in an exempt position where, or not exempt, where, if you get up at 6 and you work until 9 and then you don't do anything again till 2, if your employer accepts that, then that's fine. But most of them, I would think, don't as much, especially in the current pandemic situation. So, define that spot, use it, and then get away from it when you're not at work.
I love it. Well, and that's the thing, is you have to try to build some sort of, like you said, you had that 45 or an hour commute. Well, let's go for a walk now. Let's have the commute around the neighborhood. Let's listen to what we do. That's, I think, the biggest thing, especially looking at numbers. We all saw that in February, March. I think most podcasters' numbers went way down.
Yeah.
Because people weren't at the gyms. They weren't, in the car, and they had to figure that out. And the same thing, showing up. And I make the joke that it's the mullet dressing, You have business on top, party on the bottom. You know what I mean? Yeah. I can't tell you the last time. I've maybe worn jeans 3 times in 9 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the most part, let alone I did a video where I actually put on a sport coat and a jacket, and Steph was like, "You actually dressed up for a recording?" I was like, "Yeah, why not?" Because you didn't wear like an Under Armour or a polo shirt. I was like, "Yeah, I wanted to be a little more professional today."
Yeah, exactly. I know, and I mean, most of us have been wearing jeans to work, but I like getting dressed up from time to time, because it definitely makes me feel like there's a separation there. And sometimes at home, I wore my political t-shirt almost every other day I was working at home the last 3 months, because I wanted to, feel that I don't know, joy and hopefulness and whatnot. But so it's fun to put on a dress and put on makeup and go into the space and be productive.
There you go. Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. I think when you dress a little bit better, your energy goes up. You feel it versus, oh, I'm going to roll out of bed, brush my teeth, throw a ball cap on, and show for a podcast, or show up to work via Zoom in the office. and you can actually tell people to take it seriously because they're wearing different stuff every day versus the same thing. Or you're not having those oopsie moments where people are flashing what they should be flashing.
I know. I heard the one about the girl that didn't turn her video off and used the ladies' room. But you bring up the whole Zoom thing, and that's a really good thing to talk about in terms of productivity, because I think there's no doubt that we have Zoom fatigue right now. That's obvious. And I've been in these, 70-person manager meetings where it's a huge grid up here. And all of a sudden people are turning like, turn my video off. I'm going to turn my video off for a second. I'm going to go do something else. And when you're doing that, you are not present in that meeting and you're not giving that group, whoever you're meeting with, your full attention. Right. And that becomes really obvious after a while. So I was doing my 10 ideas a day concept that I got from James Altucher. And I was thinking like, well, I was given 10 ideas on how to be more present in your Zoom meetings. And I thought about that, like, pick one person on that grid that you're going to focus on. And that person's going to get your energy and engagement, and just find a way that you can ask that person a question or connect with that person in the chat. And just don't ever turn your video off, because it's the excuse to zone out and not pay attention. We all know that there's no such thing as multitasking. It's actually switch tasking. And again, when you try to multitask, neither one of those things get 100% from you, and they just wind up being mediocre efforts. So Zoom fatigue is serious, and it's a real thing. But I think that we still need to find a way to stay engaged in the workplace, because it'll be really interesting to see what happens when some of these companies and corporations go back to working in an office space. Or there's even some places, like I think I heard REI and Google were shutting down some offices because people felt really comfortable working from home and they could save money that way. But and that's all great, like, well, we're still in a pandemic, but is that really going to be what's going to help their business when people start going back to places and that in-person thing becomes what nurtures us because we've been without it for so long? I think about that all the time because I work in a business where, this is all good and well, but it really helps to be able to, for a student to come in and talk to me in person, for a student to be able to ask that question, to have events where we're recognizing student success and things like that. I really miss having that. So I will be so ready for that to be back in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. There's that in person that we miss a lot of, that camaraderie from the sitting around the water cooler aspect.
Yes,
of lost.
Exactly. Having a donut in the break room, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Hey, did you catch the game? The Jets lost again last night. You know what I mean? At the very end, or, hey, what'd you do this weekend? That kind of stuff we miss out.
Yeah.
And I think I agree to that. But I also think, like you said, yes, REI actually closed their campus. They just finished like a $7 million project that they're selling now.
Yeah.
And Google is shutting down a lot of their offices for people. They actually issued every employee $1,000 bonus to go buy office furniture to set up to work from home.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And then you look at what's going on in universities across, the country too. Let's talk a little bit about that. Because you're hearing this and you're in that, you're seeing so many campuses that are trying to get back to normal, and then COVID slaps them across the face a little bit. How are you guys handling that a little bit?
Enrollment numbers are down because there are some students that just they're not prepared to do this online thing. And it's sort of like, a community college is a different sort of environment. We're a very affordable institution. And in California, I think this winds up being the place of choice for students who either can't afford to go to a four-year school right away or aren't ready to go to a four-year school right away. And for the longest time, I thought of the community college system as the C team, and that could not be further from the truth.
That's correct. I agree.
I think, oh my gosh, there's some amazing faculty that work here. But there still are a lot of students. There's still a lot of first generation low income students that find their way to community college campuses, and they need a lot more support. So when they're on campus and campus is open, they can get into a computer lab, they can get into the library to use the internet. They don't have a laptop at home, they don't have internet at home. And that started becoming very obvious to us when we went to closed campus. So some students were just like, I got to take the year off because I don't have the supplies that I need. And the need to raise emergency funding and help students and get them devices and get them internet. It was a big scramble. So I think that the whole concept of students' basic needs is coming out now more than ever, because when you go from having an open campus to a closed campus and a completely remote learning environment, some of those issues with students who don't have what they need to be successful in a remote learning environment, that has really come to the forefront of stuff that we're doing. So I've been more aware of students' basic needs now more than ever. We have a food pantry. The food pantry had to close, but we still had students that needed those services. So you have to be creative and think on your feet. The foundation that I work at, it holds the funding for that food pantry. So we went to this completely online Target gift card concept, and students that would normally go to the pantry were then putting in their request and getting a Target gift card emailed to them so that they could go to Target.
Wow.
Of course, and stand in line, to go in and get your stuff. But that was a way that we could serve those students' basic needs at this particular time. And I'm sure we're not the only campus that's dealing with that. And it's, again, I have to praise Jesus and thank my boss that I don't live in housing right now, or I don't work in housing right now, because I think to be a housing professional in the COVID area has got to be mass insanity and talk about things changing nonstop. And when you're talking about students' living space, can't screw around with that. We're a commuter campus. There's no housing here, and even in, we feel that pretty hard. So campuses that have high housing programs where they rely on that income to fund certain things, I mean, that's really tough right now. So, not to rub it in my former colleagues' faces, but I feel so grateful that I don't have that on my plate anymore.
Well, and with what we do in the net space, kind of going into that, your college housing has been one of the hardest hit asset classes out there. It's still hit hard. It's not like your traditional multifamily apartments, which are still in the 90% collection rate. It's
right.
Housing. I got a buddy in Arizona. That's what he focused on primarily. He's like, I'm only seeing 60% pay through. I can't go evict these people because then I don't have anybody to move into them either right now, because it's right around that same aspect. So he's doing things like you just said, gift cards, food pantries, anything you can help to try to get people to stay in them and at least pay something versus nothing, and help them transition back as things kind of come up. Who would have thought about this 5 years ago? You know what I mean?
No. It's almost, I wish that the swine flu had been a little bit more serious, because then we would have at least had some things, in the hopper to prepare for this. But yeah, I mean, the thing, I guess what I've learned the most through all of this, is that being flexible is a non-negotiable. And if you are a person who is really rigid, that if it's, it's my way or the highway, or I can't possibly change, you are not going to be successful in the current environment. So the need to accept flexibility in your life is so important.
Yeah, I think we all know those people that are very inflexible. We have
one or two in our lives, all of us do.
Oh, I think we got more than one or two. The more seasoned people, not the Generation X or the Generation Z. I think we were born into flexibility a little bit because we're in that transition. But those before that, a little bit more seasoning in their hair, they're the ones I think that have a hard time. I got to be on Zoom to get this done, or I can't do it. I'm just going to sit down and then binge Game of Thrones for 2 weeks straight, to get caught back up on things.
Yeah. I can't possibly come on a meeting because I don't know how to do this. So we, had enough of that here. There were faculty that just weren't comfortable with email. They were doing everything the old way, papers turned in and stuff like that. And that's not going to fly. So unless you want to give up your health insurance, then figure it out.
Yeah, Texas State University here is is like the third largest university in Texas, behind University of Texas.
Yeah.
And actually we have a community college, ACC, Austin Community College, is the largest university in the country. And it's all commuters, basic. But Texas State University is in front of the professor that runs journalism there. And she's like, oh, I love that you've been doing virtual events, but I've been trying to get my staff. Literally January, she came in and met with me. She's like, this big event, I would love for you to sponsor your virtual event. And then she's like, well, but our professors they're not virtual at all. And then when everything hit, I reached out to her, how are you? She's like, oh, it's been, they had to get back on board really fast. Either they were going to do it or they weren't going to get paid anymore, Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to,
And it was amazing how quickly those decisions had to be made and people had to adjust. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'd be prepared for anything now, because we had to. There was no other choice in moving forward.
Well, and that comes down to, I kind of bring this up because a lot of times our normal 8 got so sidetracked. We had to learn how to elevate our first 8 to
Right.
get that under control before we could roll into the side hustle 8 and elevating your side 8 for you for the most part. Because I think everybody was a part of all these virtual events and how to teach you how to work better from home. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, everybody's a work expert these days. I didn't know that, you know?
Yeah. So true. And, things like, who would have thought that Etsy stores would take off so much, because these little things, these little maskies were going to be so important. All kinds of things like, I mean, I was an Amazon person before, but then like there's no toilet paper. So where am I going to get my toilet papers? I think really understanding um, how important online businesses are, and how they contribute to people's livelihood right now, that's become super apparent. And people can say what they want about Amazon. They really are more a tech company than a retailer, but they've been so helpful to a lot of folks that couldn't get out of their house or were too afraid to get out of their house. And like, who would have thought you would figure out ways to use those old cans of spinach and the garbanzo beans that you never thought that you were going to eat. I mean, we all got creative with cooking when there were things at the store we couldn't get. So, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of silver linings in this. Skills to learn that we hadn't planned to have before, ways to improve our processes, make things, make our workspace more productive. And it's, we had to learn that. But I think now, if people were to go back and say, what's been the biggest silver lining to come out of that is we've all got skill sets now that we didn't have before. And I don't think that's not a negative in my book at all. That can only be a positive. And new skill sets are what make us more marketable, and new skill sets are what make us better at our work and allow us to do more things both at the workplace and outside the workplace. So I'm very blessed that I've been able to develop some of those things, and just don't want any more people to get sick, and then everything would be great.
Yeah, I imagine you have a pretty good garbanzo and spinach salad based on those two things.
My hubby does most of the cooking in our house, so he got very creative at times.
Good stuff. Now, one of the things that you mentioned up, and I wanted to bring this up here because we've kind of talked about how you don't have the groups to network with. If you're launching your side hustle, a lot of the most important things to help you expedite your success rate is surrounding yourself with people that are going through that same journey.
Yeah.
And a lot of networking, we know, is elevated to being doing online there. What are some tips for helping people define the ideal groups, or what are some steps that you would recommend for people to tap into other people that are going through that same journey, Kris?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you're a 9-to-5 side hustler, you've probably got a group that you've been connecting with anyway, because where were you learning your job? So there's that. If you've got that Facebook group or that online membership or something like that, start there, but then ask those folks where else they're hanging out. And I think, again, I'm going to give Adam Shively and Allison Melody a ton of credit.
Great people.
Because they really went out of their way to create spaces for people to meet more people, and for it to not feel so taxed and so stressful. Because if you're an introverted person, networking can be kind of difficult.
Yep.
But I've loved the opportunities that both of them have provided for me in the way of meeting others and having these opportunities to connect. So if it had not been for Adam's PodPal chats, I would not have connected with you. And already I feel like, I have this great new resource named Scott Carson, who's also a lot of fun to talk with. So I think like finding and testing out a couple of those things and figuring out where you're the most comfortable. There's so many Facebook groups out there, and finding a couple that you want to tap into and just see where you feel the most comfortable, because it's still about community, and the people that are leading the best groups are the ones that understand that. And they're not just looking to post your link for your show up this week and let's all follow each other, but they're asking questions that create dialogue. And I think that those are the groups that I've been really blessed to be part of, because I feel like I'm interacting there as opposed to just throwing a link up and then, oh my gosh, how many people do I need to go follow now? Like, I don't have time to do that. But if Allison asks a question, like, what's been frustrating you the most with your business right now? And I go in and answer that. And then somebody else might respond, oh my God, that's my exact same thing too. How did you deal with it? Right. And now I've struck up a conversation with somebody I didn't know as well to begin with. So yeah, I think those are the places that we want to be looking, and not just necessarily join the group that's the biggest, where you think you're going to make the most connections, because 8 times out of 10, the people that are running that groups are only looking for numbers and not looking for engagement. And
yeah.
I feel badly that that's the case, but that's been my experience totally. And I've gotten out of those groups where I felt like I was just somebody else posting a link to a freebie or a show episode.
Yeah, those aren't effective at all. You know, that the link bait, as I like to call them, like, or let's subscribe to everybody's channel. Well, you don't even know what my podcast is about. Why would you subscribe to my channel? And it's just I don't need that. But that's an important thing that you bring up. Is it's just, with Adam and Allison have both been very big about building groups and actually connecting with people, that connection aspect of having that conversation, of that text message, or, hey, let's just chat. Let's just get together one night a week or one night every other week, just to network and everybody introduce themselves. I think when we were on there was 8, 9 people.
Yeah.
With that? But it was fun. I mean, everybody on that group is all friends now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And, even those tiny little questions, like, what's the most frustrating thing about having a podcast, or
what's your favorite Christian Bale movie, since he's on your list?
Yes, right. What's your favorite Christian Bale? Because he's on the Hollywood fuckables list. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on your show.
You can, but so you didn't answer the question. What's your favorite Christian Bale movie?
My favorite Christian Bale movie of all time is probably American Psycho.
Oh, yes. All right. Yes. Okay.
I thought he should have been nominated for an Academy Award for that movie. And I think a lot of people just did not get it. I think you had to read the book and then see the movie to understand how big a deal it was for him to pull that off. And I'm sorry, Leonardo DiCaprio, I love him, but he could not have been Patrick Bateman in any. He should have been Anakin Skywalker, but that's beside the point. If Leo had been Anakin Skywalker, I just think that would have been such a more successful franchise. Although he might have gotten pigeonholed too, like poor little baby Hayden Christensen. I'm sorry, Darth Vader is just not that wimpy. He is not that wimpy.
No.
Or
whiny.
Anyway.
Very wimpy, whiny.
Very whiny.
Woe is me.
Oh, I want to go to the dark side.
Well, but I'm glad you bring that up, because there has been that fair share of people out there that come up with every bullshit excuse of why they can't succeed. And that's why I wanted to have you on here. That's why I wanted to tie that back in here with that. It's a lot of people have just given up. They go, the politics, people have a different opinion than me. I could never post in that group, or I can't find people to launch that because, I tried one time and I failed beforehand. And I just get so sick of that.
Yeah.
And I just, we all have those, as I like to say, the Debbie Downers out there that we have to get rid of and remove from our close circle.
Exactly. It's not hard work, but you do have to work hard. And there's a big, hard work is working. And I said this on Adam's show, hard work is working at the chicken plant. Hard work is being in the military. Hard work is retail. Podcasting is not hard work. A lot of entrepreneur pursuits are not hard work, but you do have to work hard. And that's the difference.
I love it. Kris, what's the best way for people to find more about what you're doing or check out and order your book?
The book is on Amazon, and it's called The 9 to 5 Side Hustler. And you can even just type in my name and you'll find it. My website is krismcpeak.com. That's Kris with a K. And you can also find my new podcast landing page on elevateyoureight.com. Highly recommend that you go to that as well, because there's all kinds of goodies on that page.
Good stuff. We'll put those links in the show notes and on the website and the blog and the YouTube description and all that good stuff there for people to connect with you. Kris, man, this has been fun. Definitely
every week, because you're like one of my favorite people to talk to now. It's like I'm hanging out with my best friend or my brother. That I feel very strongly about that. So yeah, thank you, Adam, for bringing Scott Carson into my life.
Well, as a joke, Adam and I are two wild and crazy guys,
Yes, that you are. Yeah. Who's Steve Martin and who's Dan Aykroyd? That's
he's probably the Dan Aykroyd. I'm the Steve Martin, if I can just think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Halloween next year, I expect to see it.
Or Hans and Franz. We're here to pump you up. Definitely.
We're showing our Saturday Night Live
ages. And that shows in exactly with what generation we fall into, because all that stuff was good during that time.
Man.
Good stuff. Well, Kris, thank you so much for coming on, delivering, having just a great, fun hour here. Go out, have some fun, and we look forward to seeing you later. All righty?
All right, dude. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys and gals, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Note Closers show. Check out our book, check out our new podcast, and go out, take some action, buddy, and we'll see you off the top.